When ChatGPT debuted in late 2022, I was like, oh my God, I am cooked, as a writer.
It's called The Thinking Machine. It's about Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, and the world's most coveted microchip.
Jensen today is the most powerful man in AI. They power everything. They're kind of the oil of the modern world. There was like 40 different robot manufacturers, but all of them almost ran NVIDIA Thor chips. Jensen was building the brain of the robot before the robot came along in 2017. He also kind of has certain cult leader like elements to him. He kind of rules with a mixture of, once Jensen has got into the state of mind where he thinks something is going to work, it doesn't matter what uninformed stock market people say to him.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I am so excited to have the author of what's now one of my favorite new books, Stephen Witt, with us today. His first book, which many of you might have read, was titled How the Music Got Free, which was a narrative history of music piracy, also really exciting. And the book we'll talk about today is called The Thinking Machine. It's about Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, and the world's most coveted microchip. Anyway, I got into it and I just pretty much read it over the weekend because I couldn't put it down anymore. This book came to my attention because it won the Financial Times and Schroeder's Business Book of the Year. And as you might remember, we talked with Amy Edmondson last year about her terrific book. So, Stephen, thanks for making time and congrats on winning the Financial Times Business Book of the Year.
Well, thank you. And thank you.
Appreciate you joining us. What drew you to write about semiconductors and AI hardware? Seems like a pretty big shift from music piracy.
Well, in the middle there, I've been writing a lot about technology, in particular from a kind of a hard technology side. So I've been writing about quantum computing and drones and stuff. I'd moved into that space because I'd noticed there wasn't, you get a lot of kind of reporting on software. There's not very much reporting on hardware. It's a little hard to do. It's a little hard to inject drama and emotion into it in the same way. When ChatGPT debuted in late 2022, I was like, oh my God, I am cooked. As a writer, I'm cooked.
Oh, yeah.
This thing is going to beat me. And I got very concerned about that. I'm still concerned about that, to be honest with you. But it hasn't beat me yet. By which I mean, if I use ChatGPT to create text, it's still kind of, this has that slop-like element. Let me put it this way. If you use ChatGPT to create a story, it's hard to sell that story to a publisher.
Exactly.
So
nobody wants you to use AI, right?
Yeah, well, even if you don't tell them, it just, so if you're just doing it blind, it's not quite there yet. But, I was like, wow, how did they make this thing work? So I started looking at OpenAI, and there were a million journalists covering that story. And I said, well, there's got to be more to this. What about the back end? And it turns out that the number one stock in the entire country was the stock NVIDIA, whom I had known from a generation earlier as a manufacturer of accessories for video games. My cousins would build these gaming rigs to play Call of Duty, and that's how I knew who NVIDIA was. But what I didn't know, and what I learned, was that they had taken the money that they were earning from these expensive gaming rings and reinvesting it in this scientific computing platform that ended up being the default platform for building AI. And that was a fascinating story. Now, I got lucky. Usually when you're writing a corporate narrative of this kind, when a company has some kind of evolution like this, there's multiple CEOs involved, there's turnover, it's a complex story, it's hard to tell, there's a lot of people. In this case, it was extraordinary. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, had been the CEO since 1993. Right. Same guy the entire time. And not only that, he was the longest serving CEO in the entire S&P 500 in the tech sector. Like he'd been there forever, and it's just unheard of that one guy would be in charge of a tech company for that long. And not only that, he was like pressing on the accelerator. He was going deeper than he ever had before at the age of 60. So I said, wow, oh my God, this is the thing you always want as a journalist, and often it's not there. You want a character. In this case, I didn't have to do any work. The character was there, and not only that, but Jensen was just a fascinating guy. So I got very lucky in that respect that so much of the AI story ultimately was just centered in this one guy. I mean, Jensen today is the most powerful man in AI.
Yeah.
He's still driving innovation across a wide variety of AI sectors, not just chatbots, but healthcare, medicine, self-driving cars, robots is a huge area of focus for Jensen right now. So that was great too. I got lucky, I would say, in terms of selecting whom to write about.
Yeah, well, I'll say you were open to it, and then the luck came along.
Yeah.
Just briefly, I was an early employee at Compaq Computer, and
Okay.
it was. I remember there was a movie called something like Silicon Cowboys that came out many years later about the amazing rise that we had. But it's all about the people at the end of the day, right? I mean, the story, of course, but it has to be told through the people, because it's only a handful of people in the world that want to actually read about the tech.
The tech, yeah. I mean, well, the other thing is the tech ultimately has to be explained in like a
Yeah.
university setting, right? There's only so much value in just writing a pop science description of how parallel computing works,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
You need to get people in there, or else you're just kind of like using metaphors that don't really work.
Yeah, and you
Parallel
found
computing
a
in
way to bring
particular
both together. It's
is a
amazing.
very difficult thing to describe, and a very difficult, the inner workings of the microchip. I tried my best. Let's put it that way. But it's hard to get a lot of juice out of that dramatically. There's a little bit there, but for most people, they're just like, what? It's funny because these, little squares of silicon, power everything. I mean, they power everything. They're in everything. They power everything. They're kind of the oil of the modern world, but people just have no concept of what they are, how they're manufactured, how they work. So I gave myself a little miniature education there, enrolling in EE 101 online courses and trying to get to the point where I at least could give some kind of metaphorical explanation between the difference between how an NVIDIA microchip worked and an Intel microchip worked. But that was enough. I didn't go too deep. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not the point of the book in some ways, right?
I mean, for Jensen, it would be right. I mean, this is the kind of this is what makes writing these books so tricky. You're writing for a popular audience. You're writing for an audience that may not know literally anything about the computer, may not know what a CPU is. You have to explain that to them. And then a certain fraction of your audience has 35 years experience laying out and designing microchips,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And they can only talk in engineering terms about it. So it's very hard to bring everyone to the table. It's a real challenge for a book like this.
Yeah. So I know you developed this over a period of years. I'm curious to know how long it took, and was there a hard part about getting people to open up and talk to you in the book?
In fact, I did not develop this one over a series of years. This one was crashed out as fast as possible. I started writing this book in late 2023, and I turned it in late 2024. I wrote it in less than a year, and not only that, I actually had another book due at the same time. So I had to write 200,000 words roughly of production quality prose in less than a year. So what I did was I adopted, I was inspired by Jensen, who works all the time. When I was like, well, I mean, this is it. I got to work as hard as I can to get this NVIDIA book out. I adopted what in Asia they call like a 996 work schedule.
Sure.
Yeah. So in my case, it was really 997 because I didn't take a day off for over 365 days. I wrote 2,000 words every day, which was exhausting, left me burnt out. I don't know how they do that for more than a brief period of time. I see why certain people in China really object to this lifestyle.
Well, sure.
It's not very good for you.
Yeah. That's why sprints make so much sense, right? But sprints are not 365 days.
Writing a book is a marathon, but I do run marathons, so that I kind of had that background.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I just knew that this had to get done immediately. I mean, NVIDIA was the sixth most valuable company in the world when I started writing the book, and then while I was writing it, became the most valuable company in the world. And now, by some measures, it's actually the most valuable company ever, right? It's something like 8% of the concentration of the S&P 500, which is the highest concentration of any stock ever. So this is the most important company. And if you talk to people there, they know it, right? They will tell you we are working at the most important technology company in the world. We are building the future here. And that is the reason why, even though some of them have net worths well into the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, they continue to show up and work through 13 hours a day in NVIDIA.
And that's actually a question I wanted to ask you, because it's really struck me as I was reading this book, because while they're worth a lot of money now and the stock is at a high, there were certainly periods when the stock when the stock tanked, right? And they saw their options go down by 50, 60% at various points. And yet people stayed. I had the same experience at Compaq, and almost all of us stayed anyway.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'm not sure I could have said why we stayed, but you've now studied this pattern across multiple companies, and I'm curious, what did you learn? I have my own thoughts about why we stayed, but
well, I can't speak to Compaq because I do think the reason people stayed NVIDIA in particular is unique. One is Jensen. Mm-hmm. He's just an absolutely charismatic, magnetic leader who pulls people toward him. His vision for the future is so compelling. And that he also kind of has certain cult leader like elements to him. He kind of rules with a mixture of love and fear. Mm-hmm. And so gaining Jensen's approval is very important for people there. And he will, when people try to leave, he like begs them not to go, even low-level employees. Like I was talking to this guy who was like managing 10 people or something like that. This is a frontline manager at a company of 10,000 people. And this guy puts in his notice and Jensen shows up. He starts begging him not to go. This guy's like, I didn't even think Jensen knew who I was. I was like shocked by this, you know? So Jensen is there kind of like, you can't leave. You can't leave now. We're just about to have the biggest thing ever. And then that comes true. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, he's like a prophet. He kind of, predicts the future, and then the future happens after everything he said. Then you can't leave because you're working on it. I think it's a question about like what motivates people. Taylor Swift's going to put out another album. She has $1 billion. She doesn't have to, but she can't stop making music. It's her profession. It's her kind of like spiritual duty, you could almost say. I think for a lot of people working at NVIDIA, it's like they're at the front lines of the most important technological revolution maybe of all time. They can't go now for the money. Yeah. There's some things worth more than money. And the fear of missing out and participating in the AI revolution would never stop gnawing at these employees. They need to be there. They need to participate in this. So in a true sense, I think a lot of what's happening with NVIDIA, especially at the kind of C-suite and engineering level, it truly goes beyond money. And it's a strange thing to say about such a large corporation, but there's an element of truth to it.
Yeah, well, there's clear evidence that money is not the primary motivator for most people. They'd be doing other kinds of work if it were, but it's a dissatisfier. And at some point, it's okay. The money's nice, and I get to do work I love doing with people I respect, and it's important work. And I mean,
what are you going to do with $1 billion that you weren't going to do with 100 million? At a certain point, it's very much diminishing returns, and in fact, you can even have a negative suddenly you got a higher security and, like people are stalking you and you're kidnapping risk and stuff. So,
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, several things that interested me in particular about NVIDIA itself and how Wang ran the company. So I think in both of your books, you found that breakthroughs required what you called a third base between academia and finance, patient capital that corporations couldn't provide.
Yeah.
So, sometimes we see that when corporations were public or private, and they're able to be a little more patient in doing things. But in this case, in NVIDIA, between 2006, when CUDA launched, and 2012, when AlexNet came out, it was essentially funded with the bet that Wang made on gaming profits, right? Mm-hmm. And Wall Street valued it very low, if they valued it at all.
I think they assigned it negative value. I think they viewed CUDA, which really started in 2003.
Oh wow!
And absorbed a huge amount of capital, a huge amount of programming hours and investment and time on Wang's part, as having negative value. Yeah. That NVIDIA would simply be worth more if they scuttled the entire project. The stock would probably.
But how did he keep that going for 6 years when
he
the whole outside world was
his investors were yelling at him. I mean, he had activists. He had I wouldn't say NVIDIA had poor corporate controls, but the board liked him and they were his friends. Sure. They were people who'd been with him for a long time and they saw what he was trying to do probably better than his investors did. I talk a fair amount about this in the book. But basically, CUDA, at least initially, was a low-margin product with very few customers. So when you take gaming, which was a high-margin project with customers who loved what NVIDIA built, and in a very stable kind of marketplace, and you take that money and you invest it in a low-margin product, experimental product, then your profit margins go down. Mm-hmm. And Wall Street just hates that.
Right.
They just hate it. They don't understand why you would do that. They're just looking at financial metrics. They, in a sense, I would say Wang was more sophisticated than
Mhm.
his investors, right? You can understand why the investors hated it, though. From 2001 to 2014, NVIDIA's stock price did not go up. For 13 years, it was stagnant. It had a reputation as a stagnant
Yeah.
company going nowhere, it had a bad reputation on Wall Street. So you can understand when the investors were pretty upset with him. Like, it's not that they were clueless. They were like, these bets you're making, they're not working, Jensen. You should take this cash that you're earning from the GPU and pay it to us as a dividend. What are you doing? The opportunity cost is high here, and there's no evidence that what you're building is going to succeed. I think from Jensen's point of view, it was like, okay, you guys don't get it. Look, yeah, I could pay as a dividend, but what would happen over the long term then is that the GPU that I built, the graphics accelerators that I'm building, would just get knocked off by low cost competitors in Asia, and this company would eventually just go out of business, and I don't want that to happen. The other thing I think Jensen would say is, we are basically just a design laboratory here. We don't actually manufacture anything. TSMC does all that.
Yeah.
So if we're not designing something new, what are we doing here? This is basically just an R&D facility. And where I see R&D going, and this was it was really a physics thing about the way that microchips are built. But essentially what had happened is, for decades, we've been speeding up the microchip via Moore's law, which technically means putting more components onto the silicon. What had happened was that the components were getting so small that they were like running into the laws of physics. Like, they were like one atom wide.
Yeah.
Well, you can't make it smaller than that. So, I mean, I guess you could try with quantum mechanics, but they didn't have the technology to make it smaller than that. And so Jensen and his team were like, once you guys hit this limit, that's it for Intel. Moore's law is going to stop, and people will have to switch to our paradigm. And the difference there is an Intel microchip, with each pulse with each electric pulse that goes through the microchip, maybe 1 to 4% of the transistors or circuits actually are active. They actually light up with each pulse. With an NVIDIA microchip, it's like 40 to 50% sometimes. So much more of the surface of the microchip is active. In the book, I compare it to dancers on a dance floor at a rave.
Right.
At the Intel rave, only a few people dance at once, and they try and get it faster by the DJ speeding up the beat. But that is limiting. That kind of runs in the limits of how fast the beat can go. At NVIDIA, they're choreographing much more complex movements on the dance floor, where everyone's kind of moving at once, like some kind of flash mob or something.
Yep. Yeah. So
and the downside is that's much harder to program.
Yeah.
The point being, Jensen had a hard time convincing people to adopt this platform because it was harder to program. But he had the confidence that it would someday work because of physics. And once Jensen has got into the state of mind where he thinks something is going to work, it doesn't matter what uninformed stock market people say to him. He will just ignore it. If a physicist comes to him and says, hey, this isn't going to work for this reason, he'll listen. Yeah. But outside criticism is going to do nothing to affect his point of view.
Yeah. Well, that's part of his genius. He takes advice in the areas that he had the board behind him. Right.
He had the board, and Jensen spends much more time talking to scientists. This is what Jensen was building, was a research tool, a low-budget supercomputer for scientists. You flip the switch on the graphics card, and it turns into a low-budget supercomputer for scientists. Well, who is that for? It's not for established research scientists, right? Like, they have the money to go rent a supercomputer at Oak Ridge or whatever.
For the rest of it.
It's for kind of like marginal scientists whose research is out of favor. It's for mad scientists, basically. And one of those mad science groups were the neural net researchers in Toronto, who bought 2 NVIDIA gaming cards for $500 each or so, and then built this pioneering neural net called AlexNet in 2012. And that was the paradigm shift. That was the moment that Jensen had been waiting for almost a decade. And it transformed.
I want to talk about those years, and I want to talk about quantum as well. But before we do that, so we had this period of time for, I don't know, 6 years or so when he was defying Wall Street. And it wasn't just about what he said yes to, which is clear, but he also said no to a lot of things during that time. Do you have a sense of that? What did he deliberately ignore or walk away from during those years of building CUDA?
Well, there were a number of initiatives
that enabled the better.
Started that he scuttled. So one of them was building Northbridge chips, which don't even exist anymore, but at the time were a different chip on the motherboard. And I think it very being clearly, within a couple of years, it was clear to him that he would never make money building Northbridge chips because there were too many other competitors in the space. he had a really misguided modem acquisition. I don't know what
Mm,
that was about. I mean, that was I have gone back and been like, why on earth did Jensen try and make a modem chip? This is a space that his competitor Qualcomm has
right.
dominated for 40
Yeah.
years. It's almost exactly what Jensen, it's almost exactly opposite to his business
Hmm.
philosophy,
Hmm.
which is to steer into spaces where there are no competitors. With the modem chips, he steers into a place where there's a million competitors. With Jensen, you do have to be a little careful because he's retconned NVIDIA's existence to meet the history that he wants to present.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the truth is, there
Yeah.
were a number of like strange missteps along the way, and actions he took that frankly just didn't make all that much sense, even at the time, to anybody. And the modem acquisition was certainly one of those. I'd like to write a
Mhm.
little bit more about it.
Yeah.
I should call them modem people. But there were a number of flops, and then things that he didn't want to do or didn't want to pursue. It was basically anything where Intel was already making it, anything where Qualcomm was already making it. In the early days of NVIDIA's existence, he'd been thrown into what is basically like this, like WrestleMania. Like,
Hmm.
there's 70 people in the ring, and they're all going to get thrown out of the ring, and there's going to be
Yeah.
one person standing at the end. And Jensen was that one guy. He won the WrestleMania competition, the GPU. There were 70 plus
Hmm.
competitors trying to make these things, and he was the last man standing. But, that experience scarred him. He didn't want to do that again. He knew that he had survived that just by luck and by the skin of his teeth. And so from that point onwards, I would say he always steered away from hyper competitive markets like that and towards kind of these blue, open fields that no one else was participating in. And so he was willing to build a profit. What he saw correctly was that the way to make money, or one way to make money in tech, was to invest in very long dated projects that had no immediate potential to pay back your money, just so that you can dominate the field once the market does arrive. You'll be the only player. I've seen this happen again recently. I'm writing an article for the New Yorker right now about humanoid robots,
Hmm.
and I was at the CES trade show
Yep.
this year, and there was like 40 different robot manufacturers. But all of them almost ran NVIDIA Thor chips, which are these kind of edge computing devices that are
Hmm.
designed to be the brain of a robot. Well, Jensen was building the brain of the robot before the robot came along in 2017. They're 9 years into building robot brains, and they still haven't turned a profit on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But now, suddenly, they have the potential to start making serious money on it because they built the default AI platform for
Yeah.
robotics. It took a lot of vision to see that was coming way back in 2017.
What a great example. I mean,
Yeah.
he can be clear about what his fewer better is because he's defined where he doesn't want to be,
Mhm.
and then he's got the
And I
he's
think
got the intelligence that the team at NVIDIA has the skill to
Intel
get him
could have
there.
done this, but they couldn't. They didn't have the CEO.
Right.
They didn't have the institutional mindset to
Yeah.
temporarily in the short term piss off their investors by investing in lower margin products. Actually, I will say Andy Grove understood this point well. I think it was the later CEOs of Intel who didn't get it so well,
Yeah. And a board that didn't reward that either.
and investors who were like, "Why are your margins went down? We're going to
Yeah.
sell your stock. What's wrong with you? Bad managers."
Yeah. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about sort of the what's next. I think NVIDIA is now doing something similar with quantum computing, building the CUDA connect quantum processors with their GPU infrastructure. And it looks
Mhm.
sort of like the same playbook, at least from my perspective. Is he
Yeah, I mean,
doing it again
quantum
in quantum?
computing is a good 3 or 4 years from any kind of real commercial application right now, if not longer.
Hmm.
But Jensen, who actually kind of like savaged quantum computing, when I talked to him in 23 and 24, he was very bearish on
Hmm.
quantum computing. Now I think he's realized there's a market there and has moved toward it. I have followed quantum computing for a long time.
Hmm.
I don't think we're that close to having a working quantum computer. I think that there's a lot of hype in that sector. And I think also a lot of people deliberately conflate progress in AI with progress in quantum computing.
Oh,
In fact, those are separate technologies with nothing
right.
to do with one another. We know basically what the AI like stack looks like,
Hmm.
right? We've developed that. We have no idea what the quantum computing stack is. We don't know what their silicon is. There's 9 different competing hardware implementations for quantum computing. Is it going to be photonics? Is it going to be trapped ions? Is it going to be superconducting? Is it going to be the silicon spin? Or is it going to be whatever Microsoft is building? Nobody knows. So we are so early on quantum computing that we're sort of in the vacuum tube era, where there's a million different competing kind of potential hardware implementations, and only one of those can win.
Yeah. Right.
So I think I caution people who are listening. I think quantum computing is a bubble right now. I mean, I see the potential. I see what it can be. I think it's fascinating. I do hope they build it. We are not close to it right now in the way that we're close to having like a functional home robot or certain AI applications.
So your sense is he hasn't placed his big bet yet.
He's there. He's there in every scientific field. Anywhere there's a bunch of scientists congregating on something, and this is sort of Jensen's secret, Jensen will rush towards them with a software development kit he's built to get them all hooked into the NVIDIA ecosystem. Mm-hmm. But that could also be weather forecasting. It could be quantum physics. It could be robotics. It could be biomedical stuff. It could be simulation of circuits. Even building the microchips themselves, he's built an AI tool for. He builds these tools because his great fear is disruption, meaning some player will emerge that's small and then kind of raid his company from below, and he doesn't want that to happen. So he's willing to lose money for a long time just to participate in an emergent scientific field. And I should say most of those emergent scientific fields don't ever return any money to NVIDIA. But some of them will. It's a little bit like being a venture capitalist. Some of them will return it to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and so I think quantum computing is an area where he's placed some bets. But he personally, I don't think NVIDIA will build a quantum computer. He seems to have indicated he's not interested in that.
You're describing what I know is scenario planning, where you sort out where do you want to put your small bets?
Yeah.
Where do you want to put your big bets? And we're still in a small bet phase for a lot of that.
Yeah.
So just to move us towards a close, we just have a few minutes left. I know you spent a lot of time really deeply embedded in this story. Is there something that people are in general getting wrong about NVIDIA or AI or Jensen Huang, something you saw that people aren't picking up on?
If it's something that I do see, there's 2 points of error that I see, both of which more come from the public. One's from public and one's from investors. So I've talked to a lot of investors. NVIDIA is the biggest stock in the world, so I'm constantly, investment managers want to talk to me like, what's going on? And the thing I always see is they're just absolutely, buried in CapEx numbers for, Q2 or whatever. That doesn't matter. That's not what is going to make NVIDIA's stock price go up or down. Like your reading of the inventories or CapEx. You have to look, for the same reason that if you looked at NVIDIA in 2014, their CapEx numbers would not tell you it would become the largest company in the world. You're really focused on the wrong metrics if you're kind of like reading the balance sheet and hoping to get to some valuation for NVIDIA. You have to look at how their bets are doing, these crazy bets that Jensen's playing. How's robotics doing? How's biomedical doing? Talk to the customers, talk to the roboticists, talk to the people, the doctors. Are they using this product? What do they think of it? Do they like it? Do they not like it? And I think that will tell you much, much more than any kind of like balance sheet analysis. I think that has really led a lot of investment managers into the wrong. The basic reason active management has trailed the S&P 500 for the past 20 years is that the active managers haven't invested enough in tech.
Right.
They've been insufficiently optimistic about tech. And that's not just like me being a tech cheerleader, it's factually the case. And this actually brings me to my second point, which is I constantly talk to people who think AI is just slop, who think that AI has no real purpose and that it's just some BS that Silicon Valley, and this is more average general lay people, and it's often because AI does produce some slop. There's no question about that. Or they used it and it hallucinated a fact about something they knew to be cold. And then they were like, oh, this thing's broken. I'll never use it again. And what they're missing is how rapidly this technology is evolving, right? So they're looking at something from 2023 and 24. If you went back, it probably wouldn't produce that same slop, and it would actually might not hallucinate so badly anymore. These tools are really useful. But I do think people, the most common error I make is that people are overly pessimistic about this technology, and they think we're in a bubble. Mm-hmm. And I just said quantum computing was a bubble, so I call it as I see it. This is not a bubble to me. What's happening here is a paradigm shift. It's really, really different than anything I have seen in my lifetime. Anyone has seen in their lifetime. This technology is going to transform almost every aspect of the economy and society. And if you're like, oh, AI is another hype cycle from the tech guys. And look, if you went to 2020, they were hyping crypto. I don't use it as a medium of exchange. Like it still has some value, but it didn't take off in the way they thought it would. NFTs were a dud. The metaverse is a dud. VR looks like a dud. It's easy to be like, well, these guys just hype all this crap up and it doesn't go anywhere. But AI is not a dud. It is so different. It is so transformative. It's really like just one of the most important inventions of all time, and you can't ignore it, I would say.
Great. Final question. Are you optimistic or terrified about that?
Well, both, right? I mean, to me, there's many scenarios that can play out from where we are now. If you believe, as I do, that this technology will be transformative, the worst case scenario is we lose control of it. The worst case scenario is that it develops some autonomous or independent cast of mind and leaves us behind or even attacks us. That can happen. I don't think it's the most likely scenario, but having said that, it could happen. For sure, it could happen. It could be very dangerous, AI, and particularly, what I'm worried about is what we see happening now, where kind of there's a breakdown in international cooperation, and mutually each side is kind of engaged in an arms race to build, military applications for AI and to stop sharing their research on AI with one another. So you have separate zones of control building, China and the US each building their own kind of AI.
It's an arms race, becomes an arms race.
100%. We're in it right now. So that's terrifying. Those don't tend to have great outcomes. And then the optimistic case is, Demis Hassabis says we're going to cure every disease. Maybe it's true. It could happen. The bull case, I guess, is like the end of WALL-E, where we cooperate with the robots to restore the Earth to ecological balance. It sounds a little silly, but maybe that can happen. I don't know. I mean, look, the Earth is facing a dramatic population cliff. Most developed countries are. It seems almost irreversible. I think the social factors driving it are basically related to the economic liberation of women, and they don't hear too many people arguing against that. So it seems like probably we're facing a permanent decline in population, and if that happens, maybe we need AI and robots to backfill what's there. So that could be weirdly a somewhat optimistic case as well. I'm already starting to see this play out in some of my conversations with. I was talking to this German industrialist. He's like, I don't have any workers. Where is everybody? I'm starting to see the demographic cliff in my hiring in this generation. And so, he was like, I think we'll need robots. I think we'll have to have them.
Yeah. Well, fewer people, but doing better work. I think that's my better work for humans.
Better work for humans, we hope. Yeah.
That's my most optimistic.
Less drudgery. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation and the generosity of your time. I know we could have talked for a couple of hours, and sorry I had to constrain you to this time slot, but I appreciate it. It's very thought-provoking. And again, congratulations on the book and the award. And just to remind people, this is the book, and you just got a snippet today of what's in here, The Thinking Machine. Stephen Witt, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I had a great talk.